Let's go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for joining as we talk about threat intel and the C-suite. Excited to spend a little bit of time together today with two people in the industry that that I like a lot. One more than the other. I'll let you all guess which is which. It's a fun little competition. But let's start with just some introductions. Corey and Bill. Corey, why don't you kick us off?
Hi, everyone. I'm Corey Siskin, the founder and CEO of Base Operations. Quick one-liner on Base is that we decode the world's threat landscape with granular street-level threat intelligence to help organizations protect people, assets, and operations.
Corey, quick background. How'd you get into it?
So my background is in security and risk management. On the private sector side, I was based in Mexico for many years, helping companies enter emerging markets and deal with the complexities of operating environments with higher crime rates, higher corruption rates, how to do that legally and safely. And I was essentially a cartel analyst, looking at the map of organized crime moving around Mexico and Latin America. And I loved that work. I found it really motivating and mission oriented, but was pretty unsatisfied with the form of information delivery that we had, basically like writing reports, relevant to the topic for today, just writing reports and having them, go off into someone's drawer somewhere. So came back to the US, spent 3 years at Harvard and MIT, sort of seeped in AI culture, and started thinking about how we could apply AI to solve the issues that I was working on from an analyst perspective when I was based in Mexico City. So that's a bit of background on me.
I'm new in the last few years to like the venture-backed tech world, but there's a term called founder market fit, and I think you've got the perfect background for what you do at Base Operations. Bill?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Bill Sheeter. I am the Vice President of Global Corporate Security and Aviation Security at LabCorp in beautiful Burlington, North Carolina. I've been with LabCorp for about 3.5 months now. And prior to that, I've led global security organizations in the freight forwarding industry, the financial industry, and in the pharmaceutical industry. And prior to that, I was a special agent with the FBI. So yeah, I've been doing this for quite a while, and over my time in leading global security organizations, I've really been intrigued by how technology has evolved and the resources and tools that are available to us, and really looking forward to a good discussion on these topics today.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Corey. And for anyone that doesn't know me, I'm Ryan Schoenfeld, co-founder, CEO at HiveWatch. We are a software company for security operation centers to help orchestrate the security program. By way of background, started my career in law enforcement and computer crimes, and then ran global security technology at Fox Entertainment. Was a security consultant helping organizations look at their tech and how they enable the physical security programs, and then eventually built HiveWatch after realizing how inefficient most security operation centers were with all the different individual point solutions and the lack of ability to contextualize those things together and operationalize their program data. So excited to be here with these folks and jump into it. So Bill,
Yep.
let's start with you. Business cases. I think getting to the meat of one of the biggest challenges we see a lot of times across organizations is getting budget. And I think you're in a particular interesting time in your journey because you're new to your company. And so a lot of times when people come in, you've inherited a bunch of stuff, and you also have the opportunity to make some changes. How do you think about assessing the different technology that is in the company today versus where you want to take it and prioritizing that stuff? And then we'll get a little bit more into the weeds on that.
Yeah, so I think when you look at it, if you ever been to GSX or ICS West and all these, I mean
Unfortunately, yes.
the amount of resources that are available are really overwhelming, right? And you could really come in there and get really caught up on a certain solution just because of the wow factor with it. But where I've seen a lot of companies make mistakes is they don't really evaluate what the need is, what problem are they trying to solve, and then go out and find that resource that's going to help them solve that problem. I know a lot of my colleagues over the years have had some pretty significant buyer's remorse because they went out and they bought a system that just wasn't applicable to what they were doing or the industry that they were in. They didn't look at some of the compliance issues and concerns that they may have, privacy issues. And so they're stuck with this white elephant that they bought because they can't really do anything with it. So I think the first part about this, and one of the things that I'm doing now is what are our risks? And then what solutions are out there now? I have my team. We're having multiple calls with different companies, different vendors out there right now, really because I want my team to understand what's available and what's out there. But then we can collectively decide what's the best solution for us to create this journey. But it even goes beyond that is from a whole risk side with your organization. How do you define what those risks are? Now, my position, and there's a lot of companies that went through this. Last year, we had a significant tragic incident in New York with the United Healthcare CEO. And a lot of companies then decided we have to really take another look at our global security program. And I was the benefactor of that with LabCorp because they brought in some outside consultants and realized, look, we need to bring in somebody who can, run this at a global level. And so that's, the momentum that I'm building on to make sure that, we're going to get the budget and get what we need. But it's also based on risk, right? One of the first things I did when I came in here was I looked at our 10K report. And in that 10K report, top of it always shows what the risks are. I had a mentor teach me that years ago. And what you want to do is identify the risks in the 10K report that your security organization can mitigate. And then you use that as the base and the foundation for building your business cases and going forward to get the resources that you need.
Yeah, I love the 10K report is a great tidbit. And I think one of the challenges we see a lot of times in organizations is people will come in and rinse and repeat what they've always done. Or they'll come in and pitch sort of generic risk, but it's not specific to the business. And, you guys are securing different things. There's different lines of business within LabCorp that have inherent risk profiles just based on the nature of what they do and the publicity around some of them. And this is all public info. I think, how do you think about changing your messaging when you go to leadership to help align the risk that you're trying to mitigate around the risks that the business has identified in the 10K to show that like what you're doing is aligned with the overall enterprise's objectives versus just being like the crazy security guy that's running around shouting about risk?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And a lot of it,
Thank you.
A lot of it is really building that trust with. See, I want to be your favorite, so I'm shamelessly plugging myself as we go through this.
Yeah.
Sorry, one of the
Corey.
big things is it's gaining the trust of your leadership team. They have to believe that you're the right person, and that when you bring them these concerns and these issues, and you're asking for budget enhancement, that they understand that you're taking a methodical business acumen approach to the security problems, and you're not just saying, I need more cameras, I need more access control, visitor man, all the basic things that you think you would need it, but you have to articulate how that's fitting into the program. And again, you pointed out we have different sites. We have sites that do animal testing. So I have activism groups that I have to worry about. We have business offices. We have diagnostic labs, right? So it's really important for us. One of the themes that we're trying to build, and I think my team is tired of hearing me say it, but it's continuity of operations. We don't have that right now. So if we can build the continuity of our security operations across our enterprise, that's going to help us solidify our security program. And it's going to kind of trickle up to our leadership team, and they're going to see what we're doing. They're going to see the results. And it doesn't always require budget. Change management's the hardest part. And a lot of times by change management, policy implementation, standardization, that can go a long way. And if you can start showing these incremental quick wins, low-hanging fruit, then you're going to gain that momentum and the trust with the executives that's going to help you, finish out what you're trying to accomplish.
How do you balance, and I'll move to Corey in a second here. There's a lot of fear mongering, if you will, that historically gets done by security leaders and some of it's legit, but to drive budget and those conversations. How do you balance having those business conversations with helping the organization identify the prioritized risks versus just shouting about risk in general?
You have to have fundamentals. Can't just come in there with buzzwords. You have to have business cases. You have to have real live solutions on how things are going to help. I can't just come in here and the whole Chicken Little, the sky is falling, right? You have to come in and be able to articulate what your problems are and how these solutions are going to, again, mitigate these risks and these concerns. So it doesn't take long for leadership to really figure out if, as a security leader, you do have that business acumen and your organization can be a viable business partner. And very rarely is a security organization going to be a revenue producer. There are some instances where you can, but what every security organization can be is a revenue preserver. And by putting that security, the right ones in place, the right sites with the right risks assessments, again, you could show where you're going to stop losing money or you're going to mitigate potential risks of disruption. And that's going to carry the weight that you need to get the insight from. And that's how your leaders are going to realize between whether it's just factual based risk or you're just making noise and say you need budget enhancements.
Yeah, I think go ahead, Corey.
I love the idea of like revenue preserver, but I think of it a little, even maybe one step further as like business facilitator. Like I think some of the best security organizations that we work with facilitate revenue operations for the rest of the company through a variety of different means. Like obviously you've got to do your core security work of protecting people and assets, but you can also start to work in sort of a service capability to other departments within the company. And so base operations is on the like I would say plan, predict, prevent side of things rather than the detect and respond. So that opens the door for our customers to use the tool to facilitate operations. And so that might look like optimizing supply chain routes or, securing, we have customers, 3PL type customers that design routes with base operations. It could look like facilitating investment decisions, working with the finance department. If you're evaluating the risk of a company you're about to acquire and like the footprint that comes along with them, people safety, retention, all of that might fall under legal or HR, workforce deployment. So there's all sorts of different ways that security, it's maybe not the main business generator, obviously, for a company, but it's so much more than a cost center. And we really think it can be a business facilitator or a strategic advantage within a company.
Yeah, Corey, and sorry, just a quick housekeeping item. If you have questions throughout, feel free to drop them in the chat or use the Q&A section in Zoom. We'll get to them throughout the discussion, and we'll also save some time at the end to get to them. If we don't get to yours, we're happy to follow up afterwards. But feel free to drop those in at any time. Corey, one of the things that I really like about what you all do, and when we get into a security program and look at the different areas of cost across the program, it's not atypical for guarding to be the number one area of expenditure. And the methodology by which people deploy guards across the enterprise, in many cases, methodology may be a nice term. Sometimes it's spray and pray. Sometimes it's in response to an incident that happened and then it's never sort of pulled back. Very rarely do I see like an actual risk-based approach or data-driven approach to how, where, why we're deploying these expensive resources. What are your thoughts on like utilization of data to help drive like the most impactful way to spend that money?
Yeah, great question. And if guard force is line item number one, maybe kind of physical security infrastructure is number two, guns, gates, guards, cameras, all that sort of thing. So we have had many customers that when they start using base operations, they have just a blanket approach. We've got 2,000 sites and every site gets guards from, these hours and they get these cameras. And obviously, what you're alluding to there is like, that's not an optimized deployment of resources. And so that is a like a perfect example of when security can not just achieve better results by allocating those resources in a more data driven way, but they can even potentially save the company money, which is like we're so rarely in a position to do as security, right? Like it's always asking for more budget. But if you're saying, hey, we don't actually need a huge amount of coverage in this certain location and these hours because of our deep understanding of the threat landscape in this environment and trends and forecasts. That's what you get with base operations. Therefore, we advocate for a reduction here and an increase there. You can get better results with, potentially saving your company some money as well. So that optimizing of resource allocation is a really big part of, I think, being a more of a business minded security leader.
Bill, how do you think about that in being new in role in terms of the availability or lack of availability of data to do an assessment across the enterprise? I mean, I think you all have thousands of locations, if I'm not mistaken. That's a lot of work to figure out what's actually going on.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that the team that was in place here when I came on board, they earlier this year had submitted a survey to all the sites, kind of understanding what our current state was for security. And so that's kind of that baseline that we're working on. We have a lot of disparate systems in our organization that we're trying to get our arms around. Site security was generally left up to that specific sites or the real estate. So we have to do a better job on, again, getting that continuity of operations that I talked to before, but we have to evaluate what that current state is really as we push this forward.
How are you going to go about actually doing that in practice?
So in practice, it's going to be a little bit more challenging, but we got some things going on internally that are going to really enhance how we're going to do that, right? We're going to be expanding our global security organization and taking a lot of the responsibilities that had been at the site level, we're going to bring underneath that the global security team. And so that's going to give us the ability to have a lot more oversight over what we're doing. We're also going out meeting with all the senior VPs that have regional roles and responsibilities, and we're selling what our program is going to be for them. So we're getting that momentum going in that background as well. So that's kind of going up the chain with the executive team. So we're getting the buy-in of all the leadership teams so they know what we're trying to do. And once we have them on board, then it's going to help us kind of clear that path and break down some of those barriers.
So it sounds like you're as much a sales and marketing organization as you are a security organization right now.
You know what? It really is. You have to be able to sell yourself. You have to be able to really, make it that it's not a no-brainer. And we get paid as the security world to think nefariously, right? We're always a blast at parties, right? We're always the ones standing in the corner looking for, what's going to happen next. But, it is part of what we do. We have to sell our program and you have to have the confidence and the knowledge. And the thing like I mentioned earlier, it's not going to take some of these leaders long to know if you actually know what you're talking about. Are you factually basing this off of risk, or are you just using industry buzzwords, right? We don't want to be one of the big four consultants using, dropping every challenging term we can think of. But yeah, it's really about building the relationships. And if you got that relationship and the trust of your leadership team, it's going to make your job a lot easier.
I feel like something I'd
Corey?
add to that too is like knowing when an incident is one off and when it's part of a trend. Because when something happens, there's a tendency to just react, and everyone looks to security and like, what should we do about this? And sometimes that's the right answer, that you need to mobilize resources in a different way. And sometimes it's an anomalous event and like it's just a stay the course type answer. It's really hard to make that argument if you don't have data to back it up, to say like this is part of a rising trend. We're seeing more, robbery or vandalism around our data centers or our warehouses or whatever it is. But yeah, just having the confidence to say this was an unfortunate black swan, like we're not going to change our strategy, or conversely, like, yes, we need to reallocate resources in a different way.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point because the inclination so much post-incident is to react, and people are looking for the reaction and what you're going to do. And if you're not going to do something, I think that's okay. It's probably in many cases even good, but you need to have the data and the information to be able to support the why. And if there's a standard or something that's driving that or behind it, then it's important to make those known versus it being sort of this arbitrary decision where people's takeaway is, oh, well, we didn't feel like it, or even worse, the perception that you missed it. Um, Bill, I think you struck a nerve in the comments on the big four there, but that's okay. Keep it up. Um, let's move into data on that note. I think one of the challenges we see in a lot of these programs, the availability of data isn't often the issue, and especially in large enterprises, the number of tools that organizations have in their security programs is vast. Um, the ability to properly utilize the data and aggregate the data and operationalize the data and not have it exist in silos, both from a data perspective and an organizational perspective, are some of the challenges. And so let's start big picture and then we'll maybe get a little bit more into the weeds. But how do you both think about that in terms of, you're selecting your tooling, but like how the tooling fits into the overall picture of what you're trying to accomplish?
Happy to take a stab at that first. Like, I love this question. I love data in general. So like, give me a second to run here. But I mean, obviously, I feel like security is a field that historically was known for more kind of gut, I've got my guy on the ground and he says this, therefore we should do that. And like, that is the reputation that, many of us want to move on from and create more data driven decisions. How do you do that? I think there's a couple different ways that are more impactful than others. Like throwing numbers at people is not always the best solution. Sometimes it's helpful, but we find that visualizations, maps, like something very
Mm.
tangible is easier to digest. And this is a small thing about base operations, but like people just love the way we visualize data, and taking something incredibly complex and making it simple really gets you that buy-in and that sort of quick decision that you might need from the C-suite. You got something loaded up, Ryan. You look like you got
Oh,
a
I was
comment.
just saying it was like
No.
a nice way to describe the KISS method.
Yeah, yeah, sure, absolutely. And so you mentioned before, like it's not necessarily a a lack of data, and that's where what we do is we aggregate thousands of sources that are messy, that have misreporting, all sorts of confused ontology. Like there's all sorts of problems with the data. We run it through an AI ML oriented, machine learning oriented pipeline that allows us to clean it and visualize it so that you can zoom around the globe and like deep dive into any location and get a sense of the threat landscape. So that continuity between like the wrangling of the data and making it sort of equally available all around the world, plus the modeling that we put into the platform in order to give you that universal picture to facilitate decisions. I think that's a big part of what we do. So taking something complex, making it simple so that you can get those answers and get that buy-in that you need.
Um, you
I,
uh, you
I, I
struck
agree 100.
you struck a rule. Hold on. You said AI and ML, and on these conversations in security, now we have to dig in. So let's talk about AI for a second here, Corey, in the context of what are you actually using AI for in terms of that data? Because I think, and the reason I do
Yeah.
this, anytime somebody on a security webinar says AI, is we get a lot of sort of BS AI talk in the industry, and also a lot of people don't necessarily understand the different uses of AI and its benefit versus just data or orchestration or analytics. And so dig in for a second on what AI means for you.
Yeah. First and foremost, we want to solve problems for customers. We don't want to just fit AI into, the product wherever we can just to say we're an AI company. That said, AI is really built into the foundation of what we do. Our CTO, Jesse Olson, has a PhD in AI from Carnegie Mellon and has been a thought leader in the space for a long time. So working with a complex data product, it is kind of inherent to what we do. But everything from, more routine machine learning to super advanced AI, we're using it, applying it in our sort of data ingestion, cleaning, wrangling, all the sorts of like top of pipeline data elements. We use AI as we're doing, through natural language processing, through geocoding. We look at the text of an article about a shooting outside of a mall in Lagos and can put that down to a dot on a map and do that at scale all around the world to create a sort of proprietary database of these incidents at scale. And then we use lots of modeling to create threat maps where that foundational data doesn't exist. So if there's no latitude longitude based data in a given location, how do you know what to do at that super granular level? We've created these maps that allow you to take data from a country or city level, add in contextual layers like demographics, points of interest, like transit hubs, et cetera, and create a risk map where it was impossible to do that before. So I could talk about this stuff forever, but I'll stop it there.
Bill, I interrupted you and I probably screwed up your flow, but what were you gonna say? What were you gonna say?
No, you did interrupt it, but that's okay. No, I'll just take what Corey said to kind of a next level, right? So it's interesting, to hear how she looks at it and from base operations. Now, from my perspective as a security, more of an operational practitioner, not that everybody else isn't, but how I view AI and the data is how can I, again, to your point, what is AI? I mean, I don't think we've really defined what it is in the physical security world and how we can use it. But in my vision, I'd like to be able to figure out how we can use it as a force multiplier. How do I take this technology and these resources and I create a virtual headcount with this? And can I help my team with AI? Can we have an AI take all the data that's coming in from geospatial analytics of all of our locations globally and give me a daily intel report in 10 minutes that it would take an analyst half a day to put together? So I think from my perspective in leading a global security organization is I have to be able to get my arms around all the opportunities with AI. I know HiveWatch has a great job, shameless plug, but I think we have to figure out how we're going to use it as that force multiplier, to use it to our advantage and not just drop AI as a buzzword, especially again, going back to your points earlier, when you're talking to your leadership teams and trying to use budget enhancements for AI related resources.
So we got a good question relevant that came in. What's your recommendation for helping GSOCs create a unified narrative for executives when organizations run multiple threat intelligence platforms? And the second part of the question, just to go deeper, is struggling with synthesis across multiple tools rather than a lack of data.
Yeah, and I think that gets back to my point earlier is are you using the right tools and the right resources to solve the problems that you're trying to accomplish, right? There is information overload. When I first started, when I left the bureau and first got into global security, this was back in 08, 09, our challenge was getting information about what's going on. Now we have to decipher between what's intelligence and what's noise. You have everything from crowdsourcing to, 1,000 different types of data coming into you. So in order to how do you ingest it, how do you utilize it is again, it's you gotta narrow the scope and define on what you're trying to solve. And then from there you can always expand it. But if you have just because you have 10 forms of data coming in, you could have conflicting information. And well, then how's that going to work? Do you just sit on it? Do you not do anything? So it's going to take some time to develop that muscle memory on what resources you're looking for, how you want to use them, and how you're going to make them applicable to get to your mission statement.
I've had an interesting conversation come up more lately than I'd like to hear it come up with practitioners as they're evaluating different tools, have the opinion, and this is like a liability conversation, but if you know about it and don't act on it, what's the risk versus if you don't know about it, what your risk is. And in some cases lately, I've been hearing more and more people say we'd rather just not know about it because we don't have the ability to actually act on all of the stuff that's coming in. There's such a data overload.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's the right take, but it's interesting how much more I've been hearing that lately. And I'm curious if it's just me, or if either of you are hearing that too.
I feel like I used to hear that a lot more like 5, 6 years ago. Like, I don't even want to know. Uh, I think that works as up until the moment it doesn't, and then you're in big trouble and then you're fired, So I wouldn't recommend that as a
I
strategy.
wasn't
I would say,
recommending it. I was kind of shocked that I'm hearing it as much as I am.
yeah, good
And
clarification.
yeah.
To Nate's question, I would just add on to what Bill said that um, similar to themes I've been hearing for like 5 to 6 years in this industry is on at least on the intelligence side, threat intelligence for physical security. Everyone wants a single pane of glass. And I have seen so many security departments try and build their own, just scream into the sky that they want everybody to integrate and for everything to be all in one place. I don't see that happening anytime soon. So, I think of the spectrum of plan, predict, prevent, like left of boom, detect, respond, communicate, right of boom. I don't really see any good integrations coming down the line that's going to create like a perfect solution for everybody. And therefore, I think people need to find the right balance for their organization between sufficient integration that you're not overcomplicating your life, but then also you got to get the best data where you can. And so sometimes we find we'll hear on the market that people are like, if you don't have this level of granularity of threat intelligence, in every corner of the world, then we don't want any part of the platform. Like, it has to be completely uniform. We've done a lot over the years to change that with, our base score being fully universal and, lots to address that problem. But I do think you need to find the best data, whether it's regional or subject matter, and like work with the best data that you can, all things being equal.
So how do you take all the data that's coming in, and Bill, maybe this is a question for you, and decide what you're not going to act on, what you are going to act on, and then what of it actually reaches the level of notifying the C-suite?
Yeah. So that's a tricky question, right? Because you have
You're
to,
welcome.
thank you, I appreciate it. Guess I'm not your favorite anymore. I think part of it is you have to understand what the risk appetite of your leadership is. Because if I'm going to bring something to my leadership and I think that we have to act because of potential business disruptions, or we have to make some whether it's with our planes that are moving some of our diagnostic material to our different labs every night, I have to make sure that it's within the risk appetite that they want to hear about, and that's one of the balances. By definition, a risk management team, you're accepting the fact that every business operates with a certain level of acceptable risk, and what is that acceptable risk that you're willing to undertake, and that's something again you're going to have to determine and figure out because every company is going to be different. So I think you have to first define this. And for me, like my level is if this is going to cause a business disruption, if it could cause reputational risk, if it could put LabCorp in a bad light in any shape, way, or form, I'm going to escalate it to our leadership team or the right people that are going to make decisions on how to operate. Whether perfect, quick example, the unfortunate UPS airplane that crashed in Louisville last month, right? We actually had some samples on there, and we had, well, not actually on there, but we had planes coming into Louisville Airport. So we had to go and find an alternative airport so that we can make sure that our samples were getting to where they needed to go, and we didn't have any disruption in the business, right? That was certainly something that, yes, we want to take to our leadership and make sure that they're aware so that we could notify clients, notify the labs, and make sure that the proper steps were being taken. So, and I think it's just going to be different amongst every company, and you have to be able to understand what the acceptable risk is. I work very closely with our risk committee from the board to make sure I understand what their risk tolerance is, and then I figure out how I'm going to take it into my organization, and then basically matriculate it back up.
It's a good term. Whatever you're able to share, Bill. What is the risk committee, and who makes it up?
So I report into our CLR, Chief Legal Officer, and so the risk committee is made up of our head of audit, head of taxation, our general counsel, global security, and it is a function and part of the board of directors.
Very cool.
I would say that's
Uh,
like a very sophisticated approach to risk that I don't see in a lot of organizations. So that's cool to hear.
Corey, you mentioned before single pane of glass, which is you're speaking my language now. Um, but for both of you, what do you think are some key integrations that either exist or don't exist today, but that like really need to exist to help drive these programs forward more? And really, this is just like my product research because I'll just go build it. But go ahead.
I mean, I don't want you to build this, but I do think they're like I mentioned that cycle, the crisis detection or plan, predict, prevent, detect. I think some integrations would be helpful there for the industry, and we're talking to some potentials. Nothing to announce yet, but like I think bridging that gap so that there's not um, any sort of daylight between what we're anticipating happening and then what actually happens and then how we respond to it. I think that would be an integration that would make a big difference for the industry.
Bill?
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, we're actually at the stage where we're going to be building out a GSOC, and so my determination right now is what's the best thing to do? Should we build a total in-house? Should we go with a hybrid model, or should we totally outsource it? And that's I mean, that's probably for a whole nother session to talk about the merits of what type of a GSOC you should build. If based on my 3-month analysis right now, I'm leaning towards perhaps a hybrid model is the best part for us to do because there's certain things that a hybrid model we could outsource and do a lot better than what we can do in-house. But I do have the capability to take some of the more intelligence-driven monitoring and bring that as an in-house GSOC and maybe our systems monitoring and everything else. So I have a single pane of glass for my hybrid model, and then I have a single pane of glass if I bring half of it in-house. So again, it goes back to what works best for your company. There's some solutions out there that try to be that one size fits all, right? But you can't put a round peg in a square hole. And so if you try to do that, then you're going to be frustrated. You're going to fail. You and Corey are going to get a lot of phone calls from people like me saying, "I need a better solution. What can you do for me?" And so that's how I think you really do need to approach it. And yeah, that's hopefully if we have a follow up to this next year, I'd like to be able to say, hey, we've got our GSOC. It's becoming operational, and here's the model that we went on, and here's why. But it's all based on risk. It's everything we do is based on risk and how do we minimize our exposure to nefarious events occurring.
Well, if you're
Something.
down for
Oh,
Q4 next year, we'll do a follow-up session to this and hear the updates from a year
Roger
from last.
that.
All right. Sorry, Corey, go ahead.
no, I was just going to add, not so much an integration, but maybe a fusion of internal incidents and external incidents is also really necessary. So like base operations typically, or historically, I should say, has been more focused on the macro threat environment, crime, violence, unrest, geopolitical instability, that sort of thing. And then there's kind of a whole other suite of tools for, what's happening inside your business that could potentially produce risk for the company. I think fusing those two, and we're now offering that, within the base operations platform, but also, potential integrations with other companies. And like, would be remiss if I didn't mention that using like integrating some sort of even if it's just like being in the same GSOC, like a HiveWatch and a base operations in that same workflow, I think is a really important next step to not viewing those worlds as like completely, distinct.
Good you mentioned that. So as we get close to wrapping up and moving into the Q&A section, just a reminder, feel free to submit any questions through the Q&A or drop them in the chat. We have a few that have been sent in as well. I want to talk about measuring success for a minute. We talked sort of about how you think about what you want to do, but how do you think about measuring and reporting on success? And the reason I ask this is I think a lot of times historically we've heard oh, because X bad thing didn't happen, therefore we're a successful program. Sure, but that's not actually really tangible. It's not quantifiable. And so how do you all think about like actually taking data and providing some type of quantified success metric to your leadership and Corey, maybe across your customer base?
Yeah, I can start. So we work with each of our customers to help them define the ROI of the tool and communicate that up to their leadership. And it's different for every company because they view things differently. And to Bill's point around, risk tolerance, like people have different priorities, but we generally use a three-part framework. So for the efficacy of base operations, we're looking at, does it help you better allocate resources, and did you save time and money there, to Ryan's earlier point? There's a productivity argument. Did it save you time? Did it force multiplier analysts? Could you produce better work faster? That's a big part of it. And then there's what I brought up in the beginning with sort of business facilitation. Did it help you did it help you serve the operations department? Did it help you facilitate investment decisions, or people safety, retention? Like, did base operations allow you to serve other parts of the company and facilitate business? An interesting example of those sort of like follow-on business facilitation moments is, one of our customers, after the Brian Thompson murder in New York, they ramped up their executive protection like a lot of companies did. When the executives started directly seeing the reports that were coming from base operations and they saw those visuals, they started connecting the dots on their own of like, well, this would be really helpful for our real estate investments. Like, let's use this for the real estate team. So adding value to a company, to a security team, and allowing the tool to sort of move throughout the organization because you're adding so much value. So that's how we think about ROI for our customers, and use that framework to quantify it for each of them.
Bill, are you open to
Yeah,
sharing some specific metrics that you measure or plan to measure in terms of reporting to leadership?
yeah. So you have your traditional metrics that you can do from a physical security perspective, and it's reducing the number of alarm call outs or events that are happening that are easily measurable with your electronic security. But it's really sometimes it's kind of difficult to report what doesn't happen. Have we minimized the number of activist activity at our sites across Europe? Well, okay, we can measure that. And is it because we're being more proactive, or is it just because the activist groups aren't as active, right? So it's kind of like, just because there's a fine line between being lucky and good. And we want to kind of be on that good side, but I'll also be, if it takes some luck to be good, I'll take that as well. So I think it's really how are you're measuring and how you're quantifying it. And it's again, how are we showing that nothing happened? And I think you could take some comparative crime statistics to show, what else is going on, what type of crimes taking place where you have your locations, and show that, hey, we have a minimum number of that. We've had incidents with car break-ins or car vandalisms in a parking lot. Well, we had lights, we had cameras, we had call boxes out in some of these parking lots. So we're taking those proactive steps that are hopefully going to drive those numbers down. And then by taking those metrics and producing them, we're able to show, here's what you got for your investment. So that's really what you have to do, and it's incremental steps as well, and don't minimize them. How do I measure success? Well, obviously, I want my bosses to think we're doing a great job, but I think some of the most flattering compliments I've had over my career is when some of my colleagues have said, "Wow, you guys are doing a great job with this. Can we come see how you're doing it?" How that's kind of, for me, it makes me feel that, yeah, we're on the right track, that my colleagues want to come and look at how we're building things. And I've done it myself. I've seen some really great things going on, and I'll reach out and say, hey, can I come watch your operations? And I will shamelessly steal them as my own. But that's a big part too, is, it's a small but tight industry that we're in. And there's not a whole lot of competitive advantage sometimes by sharing security best practices and measuring yourself. And that's one of the biggest resources I think that we have.
That's
Yeah,
so
I
true.
won't I won't shamelessly steal this and present it as my own. I'll give credit, but I always enjoy having a conversation with Josh from Chipotle, and he's always okay with me sharing this. But I think a lot about supply chain and security's role in protecting supply chain for the organization, and whether you're in the pharma business and looking at all of the movement of drug and supplies, or you're in the clothing retail business and you're looking at supply chain. Um, I love the Chipotle example because it's tangible, and I also love Chipotle. And I love their guacamole. And imagine walking into a Chipotle location and there's no avocados or there's no tomatoes to make the salsa. And while that sounds like a stupid example, like that's critical to their business. And so from a global security perspective, protecting the supply chain of avocados and tomatoes and dairy and all of those things is business and mission critical for that business. Um, and I love thinking about it from that perspective, because as you think about the measurement of success, looking at the potential supply chain disruptions that were detected and mitigated, or looking from a threat monitoring perspective at the number of threats lobbied against an executive, and maybe most of them were non-actionable, but one or two of them were. But like I think those are tangible metrics that people can understand and that actually drive leadership comprehension.
And I think there are the headline events, United Health Group, like those,
345
the
Park Avenue.
NFL. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Those are the events that can dramatically, change the industry. But then there are the quiet events, quiet, like maybe they don't, uh, it's not one big headline, but you're having
Which is the
repeated,
vast majority of them, right?
right, vast majority. So like, supply chain interruptions, organized crime, like we constantly see things happening around Memphis and different areas with organized crime and supply chain interrupting those routes, stealing off trucks, loss prevention, like organized retail theft. So those are the things that are happening on a daily basis that might not capture all the attention, but having a better sense of how they're changing makes a huge difference for a company's bottom line.
Well, and not only that, you have to your point earlier, Ryan, about being a marketing person, is from a security perspective, you have to take advantage of those. And I've said before, sometimes you never let a good crisis go to waste. But a lot of us will pontificate that certain risks that are out there, and that we need to, whether it's put in a mass notification system or beef up our executive protection program, and then something happens, and it's how fast can you get it done, Bill? Right? So you have to. It's unfortunate and it sounds horrible, but you do have to be able to take advantage of these events, because it's going to how you're going to build your program, and it's going to build your bona fides for, yes, you did tell us that this was going to happen. And as things start going down the road, and the maturation process of your career, people are going to start saying, okay, he knows what he's talking about, she knows what they're talking about.
We have a question here that I promise wasn't a plant, but it's amazing. What approach would you suggest to get an overwhelmed remote monitoring operations center monitoring video analytics and alarms back under control and sustainably reduce alarm load while improving true detections? Um, in one word, HiveWatch. Uh,
Say
but
Haywood on this call, put the questions in.
no, I swear it's not a plant. Thank you, Bob, for for the question. But the reality is that's literally what HiveWatch does, and ties your different camera and access control and guard management, and has an AI layer on top, which detects the real and false alarms through your different feeds, and does that at scale. And so we can do thousands of alarms per minute and escalate the stuff to a human that requires a human to intervene, and resolve the stuff that doesn't, based on your SOPs. So shameless plug there. Thanks for the question, and happy to follow up after. Um, so another question, and I love these ones because it's asking for something tangible. So for both Corey and Bill, your challenge here is actual example, not high level. Um, and this is on the topic of, in the industry, we're always talking about shifting from reactive to proactive. What is one tangible thing that you've either done or seen done that has actually helped an organization become proactive in some element of their program?
Baselining and then detecting change and acting around that change. So Bill mentioned, he's in the process of creating a baseline across LabCorp's footprint right now. That sort of thing, like understanding, you've got hundreds or thousands of locations. What are the high risk, medium risk, low risk, et cetera? And then monitoring change over time and taking corrective action when you see those patterns changing. So a location just shifted from medium risk to high risk. Do we need to reevaluate our physical security infrastructure, our guard force at that location? Let's make that corrective action now and see, if what impact that has. So I think that is like the purest way to be proactive is to watch the trends emerge and take action before it materializes in an incident.
Yeah, so I
Bill?
can give you a real example. This is from my previous position when I was at Flexport. Um, Multiple warehouses around the world, we were trying to get some significant security enhancements, 100% coverage within the warehouses, alarm monitoring going on, glass break, all the things that you would need in one of these freight forwarding warehouses. And it got turned down a couple times from budget. So then all of a sudden, our sales team starts coming to us and starts talking about these, high clients that we wanted to start working with. And we didn't have that capability within our warehouses to meet minimum security requirements. So I changed the narrative a little bit. I said, hey, you know what? Let's get a TAPA certification. Well, and I sold the TAPA certification basically, and the caveat was if we are TAPA certified, we can now start bidding on these high value clients. And these are name brand, everybody knows who they are clients. And so I was able to sell that. And I got 4 warehouses in a year, TAPA level A certified, but we had to do the same security request that I had made that had already been turned down from a budget. Since I rephrased it and said we want to use it as a TAPA certification, we were able to then generate a significant amount of business basically because we now met the minimum security requirements from these clients. So we had to kind of think outside the box. We got proactive. We really did a lot for the brand. It was a lot for Flexport to say, hey, we had TAPA level A certifications. One of the few freight forwarding companies that had that, got it done in a year and significantly increased the bottom line because we were able to bring on about 12 clients that we never would have had a chance at had we not built out that security organization.
Yeah, that's great. Corey, 1 minute or less here, but one of the things I think a lot about is granularity of data. And with some of the clients we work with that are global and thousands of locations, it's not super helpful to use city level or city level data to drive decisions because the reality is the business exists within a much smaller segment of a city. Can you talk a little bit about like city level data versus maybe the more legacy stuff where you would look at cities or neighborhoods or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly like well teed up. And I think we all know that to be true as people that live in cities. Like there's different kinds of neighborhoods, there's different environments. And when you take a blanket approach to an entire city, an entire country, an entire region, you're missing out on opportunities to take advantage of different markets. And I felt that very personally when I lived in Mexico. And it's an exciting market. It's young population, like great market that a lot of companies should consider entering. But you do have this security landscape where you really need to understand at a granular level, where are you operating and what sort of risk does that present. So yeah, that type of granularity block to block is what base operations specializes in. And it makes all the difference for our customers.
So we very specifically don't like to do a lot of selling on these webinars. It's really about thought leadership, and we both got questions that kind of teed up what we do. But real quick on HiveWatch and base operations, Two main things that we do at HiveWatch. We offer software for security operations centers to make their programs more efficient and effective through the orchestration of their different tooling and people and operations. We also have a GSOC as a service that we offer and do monitoring and stuff on behalf of our customers. Corey, real quick on Base.
Yeah, Base Operations decodes the world's threat landscape with granular street level threat intelligence. We do that by ingesting data relevant to crime, violence, unrest, geopolitical instability, even drone incursions all around the world, and turn it into actionable insights and forecasts that help organizations protect people, assets, and operations. So this was the conference venue where I was yesterday, work on a panel. So I brought this up. Like, this is the level of precision and granularity down to a tenth of a mile that you can access with Base Operations all around the world. We serve, Fortune 1000 customers. We've got dozens in the Fortune 1000, and then we also have customers in the Department of War and spreading throughout federal as well. So that's Base Operations.
Awesome. Well, Corey and Bill, thank you both for joining and your time and intellect. I'm not going to answer the question on my
Who
favorite.
is it? Who is
Yeah,
it?
we're not going to go there, but maybe we'll send out a vote to all the folks that were on the webinar, and we'll get the answer that way. But anyways, thank you everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.